Welcome back, everyone. I am the Maverick, and this is the Wild Side Encounter, a place where truth and controversy collide. It's an honor for me to be here sharing with you my thoughts, beliefs, and my experiences. My goal is for you to have an out of your mind, out of control experience, yet at the same time, an educational, enlightening, and transformational breakthrough. Again, if you're looking for normalcy, this isn't the place for you. We get down and dirty. We discuss things that are beyond the scope of ordinary, but having powerful rooted dimensions in life. The world needs people who are going to be crazy enough to stand against the opposition. Get to the core issues, the truth that needs to be spoken of. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, get ready for a ride on the wild side. We are going to have a breakthrough today. We are going to take a look at our emotional behavior and how it affects our thoughts and the way we live. How we react from our emotional cries isn't really about the present, but rather a reaction to what happened in the past, our childhood. We seem to relive the stories of an old wound that hasn't fully healed, and we then express it in the present moment to ourselves and others. Every day, the past seems to show up in our present. So being aware of this will allow us to realize why the emotion is there and what it's trying to say. Learning how to navigate ourselves and our emotional experiences with awareness will help us see further into the depth of our lives. A lonely life where no one understands you, but don't give up on who you are. We're living in a world where there's a lot of emotional chaos coming from our environment, family, friends, work, religion, culture, but also from the wounds of our past. So what do you do when you're having an emotional experience? Does it work for you or does it debilitate you? Can you hear what it's saying? Are you present in the moment or do you suppress the feeling and say, screw it, I'll deal with it later? Through the shadows of depth, our moods, emotions, and our feelings are lurking amongst us, trying to find their self-identity, to understand who we are, why we are here, and what's next. They are teachers that have descended upon us to help us and show us the way. But how do you know when you're having a mood, having an emotion? Well, you're feeling it in the realm of your psyche, in your beingness, in every cell of your body. They are what we call the psychophysiologic phenomenon. They exist in your psyche, but they're manifested, they're rooted, and they're made real in your biology. After all, they are you. So often we tend to push our moods aside and pretend they don't mean anything when in reality they are everything because they are a reflection of the soul. The universe is an inescapable place where you can run but you can never hide. We tend to protect ourselves through our mood, our emotions, and what a perfect strategy that is. Hiding from the realism that, you're a human being who has feelings, someone who may not know how to process those feelings that are building up inside of you, ready to express themselves. Instead, we learn how to shut those feelings down. At some point in our lives, something happened. Either we went through it personally or we viewed something that affected us. And it's difficult to process that without being judged or labeled because it doesn't fall under the category of what seems to be so-called normality. And that's scary. How can we navigate through these churning emotional tidal waves and find understanding and peace within what seems to be a form of insanity, but is really a justified human experience? As far as I know, we are flesh and blood, not pieces of iron. We are governed by a vibrational energy that surrounds us, that drives us. We are not robots with push buttons to be programmed. When you feel something, you see it as a rightful passage to expression. You are expressing what you're feeling inside of you. Where there is pain, there is a counter reaction that is trying to be with that pain to soothe it, keep it from being more painful. So when we take a look at what people are going through and see their expressive behavior, we label it as wrong. You're not supposed to be doing that. But if they're not supposed to be doing that, then why are they doing it? There is a rightful passage, a compelling reason for that person to be and do whatever he or she needs to do for that moment. A quote from the famous poet Shakespeare: "All the world's a stage, the men and women merely players." That's correct. It's what I call the game of life. The lights are on, everyone is watching, your character is on full display, and this is as real as it gets. You can't fake who you truly are or what you're feeling. It's going to come out one way or another. You may not get a standing ovation because you're about to show the audience the real you, and it may not be what they want to see, nor can they handle the power of such a character, such realness, truth, and authenticity. So you then begin to question your thoughts about who you are. Is this normal? Am I normal? You cannot handle this power right now, so the suppression begins and you become good at hiding your feelings, your pain, channeling them into addictive tendencies as an outlet for pain relief. Great strategy, by the way, except eventually we are going to have to get to the root cause of the underlying emotion, otherwise it can harm us later on. Why can't I be me? What can I say? The title for this segment was really supposed to be for you, the viewers, in reference to why we can't just be ourselves. But then I realized it was as much a part of myself as the words started to flow. I can definitely say this is something I struggled with for half my existence. I would come up with so many reasons why I can't be me, with all of them having deep emotional attachments to my experiences as a child. Allowing your thoughts to flow, embracing the silence, letting your imagination speak to you, giving you a sign that what's going on in your innermost personal world isn't some sort of outrageous cockamamie story that you're suddenly making up, but rather so much truth trying to make itself shown to you, but you're not fully connecting with those thoughts and feelings because there's a disconnection from the pain. We learn consciously and subconsciously how to turn it off. It's kind of like we're stuck in between two different worlds. If we allow ourselves to express the true nature of our feelings, we would be most likely looked upon as weird, different, out of control, depending on the emotion, obviously. But then if we suppress and hold it down because of the fear of judgment, we begin to endure the suffering. It's as if we can't win. Sometimes life isn't such a happy place to be in. We find it difficult to breathe, to live, to be naked and transparent, only to have emotional outbreaks to try to explain what's really going on. Who would have thought the soul could release such feelings as a way of speaking and letting you know how you feel? It's very challenging for many of us to go out into the world and live because we have forgotten who we are, and who we are is a great deal more than what we believe. But we have a hard time seeing that because things have taken their toll. Our thoughts can be not so kind to us, specifically when it comes to social media, because we see things we are not, that we don't have. We see ourselves as not good enough because we see pictures of what seems to be of perfect happy people, perfect relationships, perfect body image, perfect sexual images. And we're absolutely devastated when we compare ourselves to that and realize, hey, wait a minute, I don't have that. I'm not that happy. Why not? Is there something wrong with me? Not realizing that what we are looking at isn't always real. For most of the world, it's a disguise, but we don't know that. And because of this, it can feel as if you're suffocating and there's no one there to breathe new life into you. Alone in the world, feelings begin their descent upon you with guilt, worry, shame, and fear. And if that wasn't enough, we have the most powerful, profound events, our adverse childhood experiences that have impacted us with trauma, eating away the lining of our being, creating a gash that can be so sensitive that whenever it's touched upon, the pain comes rushing back, letting us know it needs soothing in any way possible. Looking at mainstream medicine when it comes to moods, emotions, and feelings, It would be nice to slip into a state of forgetfulness, knowing the most profitable outlet for them is drugs. And somehow begin to allow some aspect of our being to imagine, even for a second, that somehow, somewhere in their heart of hearts, they know there's another way. After all, we are prescribing more anti-anxiety drugs. We are prescribing more antidepressant drugs. We are prescribing more mood-regulating drugs that have very serious side effects. It's so sad because the actual medical system itself has basically threatened, feared, and bullied their own kind. And I bet you that many of their own physicians don't even believe in the system that warrants the behavior to prescribe these types of drugs, only to continue the decline of those suffering through their pain, to be told you have a mental issue, that it resides in your head. And why? Because they have spent many years of their lives worshiping a devoted system, and that's all these doctors know. Not to mention, they are highly traumatized people themselves. My mentor, Mark David, said, "We are living in a time of intellectual darkness when it comes to the understanding of mind and emotions, from an intellectual perspective as to why the medical profession, the psychiatric profession, the psychological profession, our school systems, why they are in complete darkness when it comes to understanding the mind and the emotions." I mean, look, if there were honest teachings and viable information coming from these authoritative voices, then we wouldn't be drug addictive and food attached. We need to listen how the heart is crying out through our mood issues and our emotional challenges. The medical side of things, they're not listening to what the mood is saying. In their mind, you have a problem, and we need to regulate that problem with drugs. Our mood and emotions, unfortunately, do not have a rightful language. They don't know how to speak. They don't have a verbal way of communicating what it's feeling. So when they express themselves in ways that might seem like a medical situation, we immediately think there's a problem with the person, not realizing the system is the problem. The soul is expressing what it's feeling. It will not be denied, and it will not hide from itself. So if you're having an emotional experience and it's pulling you in different directions, what do? There are many different outlets that can be comforting to us, so whatever works for you is your method of coping. It could be food, drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling. It doesn't matter. It's serving a rightful purpose because you need an outlet. Somewhere in your life, specifically as a child, you experienced an external situation that traumatized you. But more importantly, it created a wound, a deep cut inside of you. And now that sensitive wound is being reopened as an adult whenever something or someone triggers it, unbeknownst to them, and that pain is felt all over again. So we develop strategies, coping mechanisms to take care of the pain because it's uncomfortable. Our eventual escape is binging, addiction, which is a strategic, pleasurable experience that gives us relief in the short term, but may have negative consequences in the long term. You know who you are. The medical profession does not. They don't know what you're going through. So we must move away from their perspective when it comes to our mental and physical ailments, because they see our problems as a dysfunction in the brain. There is something going on in your brain. This is a genetic predisposition. You have a problem with your brain. They don't want to make the connection that our mental and physical ailments are actually coping mechanisms that occur in response to trauma. So if you're having an emotional breakdown, which is viewed as a mental instability, or say your body suddenly becomes a cutting canvas, we are made to believe we have a problem that needs to be addressed by drugs. I tell you this, drugs are not transformational, but rather transitional. They may help in certain situations, yes, but not when it comes to trauma and childhood experiences. 95% of people 95% of people can be healed and transformed without drugs. Those results have already been proven. And if you want more information regarding that, you can seek out Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a retired physician who, after 20 years of family practice and palliative care experience, worked for over a decade in Vancouver's downtown east side with patients challenged by drug addiction and mental illness. Dr. Gabor is an internationally renowned speaker, highly sought after for his experience on addiction, trauma, childhood development, and the relationship of stress and illness. He clearly states what he calls fierce compassion. It's not about pain, but rather seeing the truth. Dr. Mate says, when you see the truth in someone, you see a lot more than just the disease. You see past the dysfunction. When you see the truth in someone, you see the possibility in the individual as a transformation, which goes a long way towards healing than telling someone, here's a pill to make you feel better. You see, it's easy to get caught up in the individual's pain and suffering, where the compassion is oftentimes offered as a way of feeling sorry for them rather than being offered in a way that will empower them in their journey with their pain that can be transformed at any time. Far too many people are suffering from the hurts of their lineage, bearing the brunt of insult. We take on that unwanted pain and we claim it as ours, when in reality, it belongs to the collective. Your parents, your religion, your culture. You are not alone, but we feel as though we are because, after all, we are the ones that have been labeled with a diagnosis. You have a mental problem, and now you're stuck with something you didn't ask for. Well, that sucks. But if we can see past that, we have a golden opportunity to heal ourselves. We cannot do anything about the event. It already happened. That's in the past. Can't fix that. But what we can do is heal the wound it has created through transformation. Letting go of the victim and becoming the victor, so that whenever something comes up in the present moment that reminds us of that old wound, we are in a different state, an empowered state of mind to handle and be with that pain in a different way. I want to let you know that whatever you're going through, you are not alone. I myself have had my own adverse childhood experiences that have paved the way for illness and addiction for many, many years as an adult. I was drowning myself with fear, running away from my own emotions, my own self. The events I experienced as a child created a gash, a cut so deep, a trauma that I carried forth into adulthood with my crazy, sick love affair to needles and anabolic steroids. The feeling of insecurity only amplified the addiction. You see, I grew up with two major disadvantages in my household. I was living in an alcoholic and abusive environment. And although I was never the abused, I did witness countless events where my mother was the unlikely culprit of violence. It was very devastating on my psyche, and it tore me apart. I remember as a child when going to bed, laying there, and all I could hear was the arguing, intuitively knowing what was coming next. The feeling was so bloody intense, as though I couldn't breathe, as if someone was holding me down. Don't ask why, I just had to see for myself. Tiptoeing ever so cautiously as to not make a sound, I would make my way to the railing that separated the top and bottom floor of our home. Kneeling down, peeking through the railing, I saw what a child isn't supposed to see. The trauma of it all was the fact that I couldn't do a damn thing about it. I couldn't stay watching any longer, so I very quietly made my way back to my bedroom and crawled into bed. The toll was just too great for me to continue watching the abuse on my mother. I'll never understand how I was able to fall asleep those nights. Sometimes I think it would have been easier for me not to wake up at all. My adult life was basically a continuance of my experiences in childhood. There always seemed to be a deficit in some aspect of who I was. This was specifically portrayed in my body image that wasn't kind to me at all, which I eventually learned how to compensate for by developing an intimate relationship with steroids that eventually became my controlling addiction for 13 years of my life. Steroids allowed me to exist so I can escape from the pain and suffering I experienced as a child that was locked inside me as an adult. I didn't realize I was constantly separating myself, from the pain, my emotions, which was too much for me to handle as a child at the time. The addiction was my coping mechanism, a trauma response that allowed me to exist for 13 years. The toll was just too great for me to continue watching the abuse on my mother, not realizing this external situation I was viewing was slowly ripping me apart. My safety net was the steroids. Changing my body image was my form of protection. The trauma had destroyed me physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It might as well have been me who was the one being abused. Eventually, that little child no longer had to watch in horror so helplessly and endure the events that haunted me. The presence of myself in a different image allowed me to defend my mother, but also myself. The feeling of my gut being torn apart, which I experienced repeatedly and relentlessly during these events, could finally stop, but not without repercussions. We must understand that all behavior in adulthood is a reflection of our childhood experiences. We need to stop the insults from others telling us we have a problem because we do not. Mental illness, physical ailments are coping mechanisms in response to early life trauma. We are reacting to what we are feeling inside. An emotional cry. Don't allow someone to say to you that you have a genetic problem that all of a sudden came along and decided to be with you. Our feelings are real. They are speaking, letting us know that somewhere in our container, in our being, something happened. And it needs attention now. We can be better equipped to handle that pain in a different way than what we're used to when we reconnect with self and see ourselves from a higher perspective. We have disassociated ourselves from ourselves. We cannot seem to find out who we are through our pain and suffering, so it's time to reclaim and start loving the innermost expression of yourself without fear, guilt, or shame. It's time to reclaim your magnificent, wonderful, beautiful self and claim it as a part of you and rejoin that aspect which is almighty powerful that needs no acceptance, no validation, or love because you already have it. The transformation lies within you. Be with that power, and it will guide you to where you want to go. Thanks for tuning in to the Wild Side Encounter.